Shema Yisrael, Yahu Eloheinu, Yahu Echad. Baruch Shem Kebod Malkotho Leholam Voed.
Shalom, everyone. I am the Chief Magician of Mystery Babylon. Welcome to my whole channel, and welcome to this podcast number 9. So, as everyone should know, Pesach is tomorrow evening, and in lieu of the holy Chag Pesach, I decided to, in my great overwhelming compassion and mercy, to do a rather short podcast on revealing the at least one very great holy mystery behind the ancient Israeli Egyptian bondage. So on this holy feast, we recount our Egyptian slavery and our redemption by the Mashiach of that slavery. And, you know, if you belong to a holy order or you're highly initiated, you know, you get together with very high initiates and adepts, potentially masters, and you spend the night of Pesach discussing many arcana, you know, behind this parasha in the Torah. So for this podcast, there is one very important prerequisite. So I did a video, I think it was sometime last year, entitled Advanced Esoteric Lurianic Kabbalah, Divine Ethnocentrism. This is a very, very powerful advanced video. It's an advanced Lurianic video and teaching. You know, this is a very advanced podcast because, you know, we're going to touch on some very deep esoteric Lurianic Kabbalah. So there's a link below in the description to that video. Go watch that video if you haven't. You know, if you plan or want to see this podcast, because this is a very advanced podcast. As many of my videos, they're solely intended for very advanced initiates and adepts, if not masters of Israel. So with that said, we can get a little bit into the essence of the matter. So, you know, I've always had this very powerful supernatural gift. You know, I think it's very fair to say that in many ways I am a shepherd of Israel, being the chief magician of Mystery Babylon, and being a chief sage and magician of Israel, and a chief rab, of course. And throughout my life, I've always been able to identify the children of Yod He Vav He. As an example, I would, you know, walk up randomly to strangers and be like, "Hey, you're a Jew," and they'd be like, "Yeah, I'm a Jew. How did you know? How did you know I'm a Jew?" And I'd be like, "I have the gift. I know my people," you know. But it's not just Jews. I'm talking about all of Israel, which includes Beit Ephraim, right? Now, in Christianity, right, they have this very common, I would say it's an advanced teaching about quote unquote spiritual Israel, right? Because many Christians know that they are goyim, right? They have lost sight and do not focus on biological and genealogical Israel. They've moved away from this, unfortunately. And so they then like to talk a lot about quote unquote spiritual Israel, that Christians are spiritual Israel. What does that mean? And as I'm always saying, Christians are very stupid. They're very ignorant, you know. But actually there's a lot of truth behind this very great teaching. Underneath this very general saying or teaching, there are some very powerful arcana that lie beneath. So this is where we then get where religion has evolved supernaturally by the order and command of Hashem. So now, as we are in the last generation, many of the children of Hashem have moved into what's called a Messianic Judaism. And it is Messianic Judaism that has propagated one of the most esoteric, powerful teachings of Beit Ephraim, because we know that there are a lot that 10 of the 12 tribes of Israel are lost. And the $1 trillion question is, where are these 10 tribes of Israel? Where did they go? Where are they? How do we know if somebody is from one of these lost 10 tribes of Israel? This has been the $1 trillion question, for the past, 2,000 years or so, right? And the great mystery, the highest arcanum, is that it is Christians that are the lost 10 tribes. So how do you know that you are of Beit Ephraim, of those 10 tribes? Well, if you believe in Yeshua as Hamashiach, that's how you know. That's the marker. This is very mystical. This is mysticism at the highest order. Okay? And so now in this last generation, we have many goyim, specifically many Christians that are coming to the full knowledge and realization that they are Beit Ephraim, that they are of the lost 10 tribes. And this is very powerful. This is one of the biggest signs that we are in the last generation, is that the lost 10 tribes are now starting to become aware of who they are. And so this is very powerful. And so this is really the true esoteric, mystical meaning behind spiritual Israel. Spiritual Israel, on one level, you could say, represents Beit Ephraim, because these are the lost 10 tribes. They thought they were goyim, but in reality, they're not. They're all the lost 10 tribes. Now, I'm not going to get really deep into this teaching, right? If you're a Messianic Jew, if you're very deep into Messianic Judaism, I'm hoping many of you are or have been, you're very well acquainted with this teaching. And in my first treatise, Restoration of the Word of Yod He Vav He, I think I have 1 or 2 chapters dealing with this great mystery and revealing more mysteries regarding this matter. Because Shaul, touches upon this matter a number of times in the New Testament. Unfortunately, because most Christians have been very stupid and retarded for the past 2,000 years, these teachings of Shaul completely went over their heads. Okay? So this is very important. This is very critical to understand. Okay? Now, let's start getting a little bit into Lurianic Kabbalah here. So if you watch that video, right, if you're highly initiated, and you've been initiated into Lurianic Kabbalah, some of the highest arcana are revealed in the Lurianic Kabbalah, especially regarding metempsychosis and the origin and roots of the nation of Israel. Now, we read in the in the Torah, right, in the parasha dealing with our Egyptian redemption. There's a verse. It's in Shmoth chapter 23, verse 9, and it says, "Do not oppress a ger, for you have known the nefesh of a ger when you were strangers in the land of Mitzrayim." Now, if you read the Lurianic texts, the Lurianic texts go very, very deep into this teaching, revealing the arcana behind this verse, right? And so in summary, Chaim Vital reveals that we have to be very careful with the goyim, with the gerim, strangers, because based on this verse, the great arcanum that he reveals is that there are Israeli, Rachoth, and neshamoth that have incarnated into goyim and geirim. And so then what you have then is he's basically stating you have certain goyim who spiritually comprise, maybe they may comprise of the nefesh of a ger, but they have the ruach or the neshama of an Israeli. So you have an admixture. So you have to be very careful. Be very, very careful. Now, it is very well known that many religious Jews are racist. In fact, I've stated on record that I myself am racist. Not in the way that you may think, not in a bad way, but many Jews are racist in a bad way. Okay? The facts are that Yod He Vav He is racist. Again, you have to be really stupid and retarded if you can't figure this out from reading the Bible. Now, many religious Jews are racist and in a very bad way because they have a very advanced understanding of the scriptures, and it's very obvious that Yod He Vav He is racist, right? And I mean, this is very basic stuff, right? Not every nation is equal. You have to be really fucking retarded if you think every nation is equal. They're not. You have nations that are very superior, and you have nations that are very inferior. You even have races that what we call slave races. The blacks are what we call a slave race. That's why they've been slaves for thousands of years. So they are considered a very inferior race. Okay, now the true spirit of Yod He Vav He is one that is holy, one that is very, very holy and understanding. So there's two ways that you can approach this, right? You could be as what I would call evil and be a really evil racist and say that, most nations are inferior, especially when compared to the superior master race Israel. And we don't care about these races. We're going to do whatever you want with them. Who cares about them because they're inferior, right? Or you can be holy, say, like the path I take, and say, okay, we recognize that certain nations are very inferior, but that doesn't give us a right to be evil or disrespectful, to them, and so this is the problem that we've seen played out through history, right? Is the nations that are superior have really done a lot of evil to the inferior nations, which is very, very sad, right? It's like when for a long period of time, mankind had slaves, right? And you had people that were evil and treated their slaves very badly, with a lot of evil. And then you had people who had slaves but treated them, very honorably and very respectfully and really cared for them. It's kind of like that. And so we have to be very careful, right? So when you get very highly initiated, right, you get to masters and grandmasters like Chaim Vital, he's saying, listen, we have to be very careful how we treat, these inferior goyim. We can't just say, oh, the goyim are inferior, and we can just be evil to them, because that's not really true holiness, right? And now he introduces another powerful element into the mixture, because now he's saying, hey, now you really have to be careful, because some of these goyim have the neshama or the ruach of an Israeli, right? So as an example, you may look or meet a goy, and that goy will have the nefesh of a goy, but he will have the ruach and the neshama of an Israeli. So now essentially that goy is 2/3 Israeli and 1/3 goy, spiritually speaking, from a purely spiritual, standpoint. This goy spiritually is comprised of a neshama and a ruach of an Israeli and the goy of a nefesh. Okay, and that that Israeli neshama that goy has may have been your great grandfather if you're an Israeli Jew. So how stupid and retarded would it be now to go and oppress that goy? Because if you do that, you're now oppressing your great grandfather, who's your own blood. Now, this is the essence, of what the Lurianic texts, teach and reveal. This is very crucial. Now, this is why we have to be careful, right? So, as an example, and this is where it gets really tricky, right? We have, if we look at the African race, right, at blacks, it is a fact that they are an inferior race. Okay, and I'm a man. I have big balls. I'll say the truth, and I don't give a fuck about the blowback. I'll deal with the blowback. Okay, you don't want to fuck with me. I don't care. Okay, I'm going to give you the truth. I'm going to give you the facts, as painful as they may be, and I don't give a fuck about the blowback. I'll deal with it. I'll crush it. I will fucking crush it. I'm a man. I'm a real alpha male. Okay, you don't want to fuck with me. I'm not a pussy like many of these American men and Europeans are that we have these days. What we have these days, we have a lot of pussies. Too many pussies, too many faggots out there. I'm a real man. I'm not a pussy, I'm not a faggot. I'm an alpha male. I'm a prince of Israel. You don't want to fuck with me, okay? I'm gonna tell you the truth. The blacks are an inferior race. Now I'm holy, so I'm not like, oh, like the stupid evil Europeans and who said, well, let's lynch the blacks, let's kill them, let's do all this evil. No. Okay, not every black is inferior. Okay, these are generalities. Okay, just like when we look at the superior Israeli master race, not every Israeli is superior. We have Israelis that are stupid, retarded, and evil, and we have blacks that are very genius, very intelligent, and very holy. So we're just talking about generalities here. When we say a race is inferior, it's simply a generality. It doesn't apply to the entire race because you're always going to have exceptions. Okay? Now, so this is where it gets tricky because we have had for the longest, we have Jews, the religious Jews that have been very racist, especially against blacks, because blacks are the most inferior race of mankind. Okay? And so then this is where we have to get really tricky because the holy goddess has reincarnated into black woman. Now this is why we have to be careful because our ancient oracles tell us that the chief cornerstone was rejected by the builders. I've revealed the mysteries of this oracle in some of my other videos, but if you're initiated, you understand the mysteries behind this verse and why they're so powerful. Now, Hamashak Yaakov Friend, in 172, in his Magnus Opus, he says, I told you several times that the more precious a stone is, the more it lies beneath a stone which is scorned by all eyes. But those who recognize that know that here there must be a good stone. So many mysteries. Now, we have to ask ourselves, what is mankind scorning? What is mankind rejecting at large? We have to ask ourselves, who are the builders? And what are the builders rejecting? And what are they scorning? Because we have a majority basis here. Right? So if we analyze it from this level, that the blacks are the most inferior race, we're going to have all the Jews, all the superior races that run the world, they scorn the blacks. Okay, they're racist in a very bad way against the blacks, and yet the holy goddess has reincarnated into a black woman, which is the most inferior and scorned race of mankind. This is why in Shir Hashrim she says, "Do not look at me because I am black." This is the proof of the inferiority of the black race for thousands of years. Forget the past 50 years or so, okay? The past 50 years are all fucked up, okay? From the year 1900 and below to the beginning of this aeon, okay, it was very standard. Everyone knew the black race is the most inferior race of all mankind, okay? That's a fact. Let's not get fucking stupid here, okay? The Bible tells us this. Here you have the holy goddess saying, "Do not look at me because I am black." Black is associated with inferiority because it is the inferior race. The holy goddess is telling you right here, she is going to reincarnate into a black woman, into the most inferior and scorned race. And what do we see happen when Musha married the Kushith, the Ethiopian woman who's black? He married this black woman who was the holy goddess. What happened? Miriam and Aharon, who represent all of Israel, these are the chief spokesmen of Israel. They went against Musha, like, "What are you doing?" Why? Because they're racist. Because, as I already told you, it's been known, Jews, Israel, the superior master race, they know who the inferior scorned race is. They basically told Musha, "Listen, what are you doing marrying a woman from the most inferior, scorned race of mankind? What are you doing? She's black. She's from the most inferior, scorned race. Why?" That's why they were upset, because Israel is racist. It was a race issue going on. But Musha, because he was a grand master and a divine man, he understood the secret teachings of the Mashiach, in this case of Yaakov Frank, who says, "I told you several times that the more precious a stone is, the more it lies beneath a stone which is scorned by all eyes. But those who recognize that know that there must be a good stone, because they have eyes to see. They see past the garment." The black skin was just a garment. This black woman that Musha married was just a garment. Inside her body was the holy goddess incarnated, and Musha knew this. Okay. Now, this is very important and very powerful to understand, because if we go, you see, I think I can't speak for Chaim Vital, but he hinted at the fullest understanding of the Arcanum. You know, let's dismiss for a second that a goy can have the neshama or the ruach of an Israeli, because we read in the Lurianic Kabbalah that when we read about Israel's descent into Mitzrayim, we understand all of this allegorically and parabolically. What this signifies is the descent of Israel into the Klipoth. What is the Klipoth? It is this construct. This entire construct is entirely Klipothic. We're now entering the domain of Gnosticism. When you come to the full realization that this entire construct is entirely Klipothic. I have people come up to me and ask me, "Am I Israeli? How do I know that I'm Israeli?" Well, I've already given you one of the keys. If you believe in Yeshua as the Mashiach, you're automatically Israeli. You have an Israeli neshama. So what we see then is that Israel's descent into Mitzrayim represents spiritual Israel's descent. All of the neshamot of Israel. It represents all of the neshamot of Israel descending into this construct. So we're no longer talking about the nation of Israel, the biological nation of Israel. We're past that. We need to dismiss the whole matter of the nation of Israel. Is there a nation of Israel? Yes, you can say that. Are there biological Israelis? Yes, you can say that. But we're not focusing on that right now. We're focusing on the spiritual aspects here. Okay, so what this allegorically represents is the descent of all of the Israeli neshamot into this construct, which is entirely kapathic. So now what we're talking about is all of the neshamot descending into this world, meaning that they don't all descend into the nation of Israel. Many of them will be descending into other nations. So we're no longer talking about a goy who is not spiritually entirely Israeli. Now we are talking about there are goyim out there that are 100% Israeli. They have the nefesh, ruach, and the neshama of an Israeli. Spiritually, of course. We're talking spiritually here, okay? So when you get to the fullest understanding of the Arcana, then what this represents is, what this is telling us is that you have many goyim that are spiritually 100% Israeli. You can go and you can meet a certain goy, and this goy will have the nefesh, ruach, and the neshama of an Israeli. On the outside, he appears and looks like a goy, but internally, spiritually, he's entirely Israeli. And so this is the great mystery then, right, of that verse in Shemot chapter 22, verse 9, where it says, "Do not oppress a ger, for you have known the nefesh of a ger when you were strangers in the land of Egypt." Meaning, when you descended into this construct, your Israeli neshama descended into the body of a goy. This is why we have to be very, very careful. We cannot be like many stupid Jews and many Europeans have been in the past. These are the master races, by the way. These are the superior races. We cannot be like them, like they were in the past, and say we have carte blanche to do whatever we want to the inferior races. Because as an Israelite, as an Israelite who knows he's Israeli, I know I am biologically Israeli. I descended into an Israeli body. I'm entirely Israeli, okay? But I know that there are goyim out there that are spiritually Israeli. So I have to be careful. I can't just be evil and say, let's go lynch all blacks. I can't make blanket statements and say all blacks are inferior, all blacks are stupid, etc., because that's obviously not true. So this is the great Arcanum. This is the great Arcanum. Now, very interestingly, as I've stated on record, in the past, I'm a Gilgul of King Shlomo. And so my soulmate is Queen Sheba, who is the holy goddess. Now, my wife is Ethiopian. I would say an Ethiopian Jewess, but she's black, and she is a Gilgul of Queen Sheba. Now, and by the way, this is one of the most powerful signs of when you know you have a divine man on your hands, because the highest, most powerful divine men were married to a black woman. We have Musha, who married a black woman, and you have King Shlomo, who also married a black woman, Queen Sheba. And there are other examples. But here we have two Gilgulim of the Mashiach marrying a black woman, which means that they married the holy goddess. Because the highest, most powerful sparks of the holy goddess reincarnate into black women. And my wife is one of the highest, most powerful divine sparks of the holy goddess. Now, there's no such thing as Ethiopian Jews. They're not Jews. The true Israeli Jews are white. They're not black. This is the highest confutation and refutation of all of those inferior, stupid, retarded, black Hebrews, quote unquote, because they're not really black Hebrews. That's a fucking oxymoron. That's like saying jumbo shrimp. You got to be really fucking retarded to believe that. Now, it could happen that a white Israeli married an Ethiopian woman, and they have a son who is black. Then that would be a true Ethiopian Jew. You could say that's an Ethiopian Jew because his father is Israeli. But other than that, there's no such thing as Ethiopian Jews. Okay, that's just a demonstration of very high ignorance. But I want to concentrate and I want to focus on this very powerful, great Arcanum, because this is why we have to be very loving and respectful of all of the Goyim. Because Israelites have come down and have, reincarnated into amongst the Goyim. You have Chinese, Mexicans, Australians, Filipinos, you name it. Israelites have pretty much incarnated into practically every single race. Why? The end point, the end result is Tikkun Ha'olam, apostasis, Tikkun Ha'olam. There's many great mysteries here. I mean, I'm not even scratching the fucking surface here. How deep this divine well goes. It goes so fucking deep, it's not even funny. I just don't have the time and space to fully get into it. But you need to understand and know this, because I know some of you. You don't look Jewish. You're definitely not Jewish. You certainly don't even look Israeli. But you are 100% Israeli, spiritually. Now, why you who are Israeli descended into the body of a goy, that's a whole nother different separate matter that I don't have the time to get into. That's for you to discover on your own. But quintessentially, this is one of the highest, most powerful of arcana behind this parasha that we read on Pesach. So I revealed a lot of very powerful mysteries here. I don't think I have anything further to add or state. So with that said, I can only hope that many of you listening, I hope all of you listening actually, are intelligent and spiritual enough to understand what has been taught in this podcast. I really do. Because I have zero tolerance for any bad blowback for some of the things that I said during this podcast. And if I have to deal with it, I will absolutely fucking crush it. So don't fuck with me. Shalom wa salah.